Hey guys, before this video starts, I wanted to tell you about an app that I downloaded recently. I really enjoyed the Choose Your Own Adventure series of Goosebumps books when I was growing up. To actually control the story you were reading was surreal to me, and I get kind of the same feeling when I play Let's Read's True Horror app on my phone. It's literally Choose Your Own Adventure meets YouTube horror. I would recommend it to anyone who enjoys horror as much as I do. There will be a link in the description of this video, so be sure to check it out. And on the very slim chance that you're not familiar with Let's Read's channel, be sure to check him out as well. He's a great narrator, and he frequently uploads quality content. I'll link his channel in the description too. Anyways, I hope you're all doing well, and I hope you enjoy. I was on a road trip with another girl, and it was about 10 o'clock when we realized we needed to stop for gas and start looking for a place to stay the night. I'm pretty careful, and I'll look for a nice safe place to get gas. Finally, I found what looked like a good place. It was a brightly lit gas station, clean, and looked pretty busy, with a bunch of cars and just one open pump in the middle. I got out of my car to fill the tank. As I'm unscrewing the gas cap, I hear a shout. There's this guy, and he's got a gun, and then I see a group of people. Looking around, I realize that the other cars are all empty. This was a setup for whoever pulled into the center pump. He yells for me to get on the ground, and for my friend to get out of the car. He continues shouting about how they're going to shoot us, or fuck us until we can't walk, and other threats if we don't get on the ground right now. My friend is frozen in panic inside the car. I stick the gas cap in my pocket and tell the guy with the gun to let me talk to her. He lets me get in the car to talk her into getting out. Instead, I start the car, throw it into reverse, and nearly run over one of his accomplices, leaving the station. The look on his face as we sped out of there was priceless. He looked so shocked and so dumb. We finally got gas about 30 miles down the road when we were running on fumes, but decided not to stop again until we reached our destination. A little background. I was about 8, and my mother, my little sister, and I were taking a road trip across Wyoming. This wasn't unusual, as we had family living all across the state, and my mom loved piling us into the car and driving. My memory of this event is patchy, and I remember it more for the way my mom reacted than for the event itself. I don't remember exactly where this was, or where exactly we were headed, but anyone who has ever driven through Wyoming knows that the roads are mostly deserted. We had been driving several hours behind an older green and white truck. We were approaching a gas station, and I remember my little sister being so excited because she wanted to get those little bottles made of wax that had juice in them. The green and white truck pulls into the gas station, and we follow. We use the restroom and get some snacks. My mom fills up with gas, and we get back into the car and back on the road. A little time passes, and my mom asks, "Is that truck behind us the same one that we followed into the gas station?" I turn in my seat and confirm that yes, it is the same truck. I sit back down and continue gorging myself on snacks, but I sense that my mom is uneasy. She keeps looking in her rearview mirror and watching the truck. It was a long drive to the next gas station, and along the way, the truck behind us would speed up and get dangerously close to us and then back away. After a stretch of several miles, we were nearing another gas station. My mom adjusts her mirror so she can see us in the back seat. She says, "I'm going to pull into this gas station and open my door like I'm getting out. I don't want you two to open your doors. Don't get out. Just sit tight and hang on." My little sister and I look at each other like, okay. I thought it was strange, but the look in her eyes scared me a little. My mom is a calm person, but she has this presence about her that makes you aware that she isn't to be messed with. All my friends throughout the years have been a little scared of her, which is odd considering she is just over 5 feet tall and about 100 pounds. Anyway, we pull into the station and up to a pump. My mom adjusts her mirror to see behind us and opens her door with the car still running. The green and white truck pulls in and parks just to the side of the turn-in. The driver pops his hood, gets out, comes around to the front of his truck and props his hood up. He starts messing around under the hood with his back to us. From what I remember of him, he was a really big guy, but who isn't to an 8-year-old girl? My mom slams her door and peels out of the gas station. I turn in my seat to watch the man. He turns around like he's startled, looks right at us, quickly closes his hood, even though he had only been looking in there for a few seconds. At this point, my mom is driving so fast that I lose sight of him. I was terrified, and I knew it must be serious for my mom to drive like this. Up ahead, the road bent sharply to the left, and there was a small road to the right and a few buildings. Just before the bend, my mom slams on the brakes, pulls the steering wheel all the way to the right, and, as if it were straight out of an action movie, slides around the corner. She speeds through the small parking lot of one of the buildings and parks behind it. From our vantage point, we were hidden from traffic behind us, but could see anyone passing. A short time later, we watched the green and white truck speed right past us and around the bend in the road. Obviously, my sister and I were very shaken up. My mom asked if we needed to use the restroom, and I said yes. She said she did too, but we would wait here for a bit, then make our way to the next station. I'll never forget what she said next, because it was so out of character for her. She said, "I'd rather piss my pants in this car than to be murdered on the side of the road." A little time passes, and we got back on the road and continued our trip. We never saw that truck again. I was on a cross-country road trip with a colleague. We were driving through West Texas on a major highway. In the area where we were, even the major highway was pretty desolate. There had been a truck stop or gas station about every 100 miles, and every one of them was solitary, with no other buildings in sight. These weren't really towns, the exits, just places to get more gas to get to the next gas station. It was pretty late at night, and she had been driving for like 4 hours. I can usually drive for about 8 before I get tired out. I go on frequent road trips. But she could only manage 4 or 5 before it was my turn again. We were also getting low on gas, at about a quarter tank, and you learn from road travel to fill up whenever you get the chance. So she was looking for a gas station as we drove along. It's really corny, but we were talking about fate and destiny and some other weird shit at the time. That kind of conversation gets me keyed up and worried, so I was trying to change the subject. She took an exit while we were talking, and I got out my coffee mug so I could fill up for my turn driving. We pulled into a typical Nowhereville gas station. Just the station and a trailer out back. I assume, thinking back, it was probably where the people who owned it lived. There was another car parked in front of the doors, off to one side. We got out, still talking, and walked up to the double doors, each of us grabbing a door handle. The doors were locked. I turned and looked around to see if there was a sign. Sometimes, places will put up a "back in 5 minutes" sign, and I noticed several things in succession. The coffee maker inside was halfway done brewing a fresh pot of coffee. The monitors that showed the store were visible from outside, where we were, but all of them were showing static, and there was a splash of bright red on the door in the back of the place, which was closed. I suddenly realized I was looking at a huge streak of blood, with handprints in it. Every hair on my neck stood up. My friend began shaking the door, yelling, "We need to get gas." But I had already turned and walked away from the door. "We have to leave, now." I grabbed her arm and started propelling her back to the car. Now, I noticed the other car in the lot. It had no plates. It was all dingy and had dents. There was an empty gun rack in the window of it. I ran to the car, dragging her with me. She seemed to take forever to open her door and get in. The whole time, she kept saying, "But we need gas." While I tried to explain to her, "There's blood in there. Blood." After what seemed like a year, she pulled the car out. When we were backing up, I saw through the windows that the back door in the gas station was opening. We had pulled away before anyone came out though, thankfully. I freaked out until we were 20 miles down the highway. I tried to call the police, but I had no signal. I didn't get a phone signal until we had driven about 40 miles and got to a truck stop. Again, not in a town, just a building on its own in the middle of nothingness. I called the cops. They thanked me, and I never heard anything more about it. To this day, I feel like if I hadn't freaked out, we probably would have met the robber or whoever was in the back room of the place. I also wish I'd been able to find out what the hell happened there. It was a Chevron station, somewhere in the western part of Texas, at least within about 100 miles or so of the signs for those places, on Route 10. This took place in 2013. After graduating college, I was about to embark on a summer-long road trip that I had been planning for over a year. At the last minute, my friends bailed on me, but being the adventurous sort, I decided to not let it stop me. So I packed up the guitar and went on my way. This is how I came to be a 26-year-old girl, road tripping it across the country alone. Since I was very poor, I was camping in national forests or rest stops and living out of a borrowed minivan. All was going pretty well, and I was having the time of my life. However, a few months in, I had made it to California and was traveling around the San Francisco area. One night, I was looking for a new place to camp out and found myself on a Bay Area highway wrought with unusual detours. Because the detours were confusing and poorly marked, I found myself driving through a small town, uncertain if I was still following the detour or not. It was about 9 p.m., but since it was a small town, no one seemed to be out to ask directions from. I tried to use my phone, but the signal was crummy and my phone sucked to begin with. "Figures," I mumbled, and threw my useless phone on the passenger seat. It seemed I was getting out of town and into some kind of warehouse district, but I could see the highway up ahead in the distance, so I decided to head towards it. The single road I was on led me through rows of factories, but there was nowhere to turn off. I still was headed towards the highway, so I kept on. I passed a large, older car. I'm terrible at identifying cars, but it's the kind you would call a boat. A very cool, classic car kind of thing, in the parking lot of a factory. When I passed, he switched on his headlights and pulled out behind me. I honestly didn't think anything of it. I figured the poor guy was lost too, and followed me, thinking I knew where I was going. I continued on for a while, with him still behind me, and I finally reached where the highway passes over the road. Much to my dismay, I turned a corner into a gravel lot of sorts that dead-ended into a fence, right underneath the highway. This is where it gets creepy. The gravel area was about 2 lanes wide, but the large car pulled up behind me, directly in the middle, so I couldn't get around him. This raised an immediate red flag, but I tried to convince myself that he was just a lost guy, and his parking in an inconvenient way was merely an accident. However, I didn't want to get out of the van and ask him to move, so I began trying to come up with a plan. I pulled a little farther towards the fence, as if trying to make a U-turn. I already knew there would not be enough room, but what he did next frightened me. As the nose of my van came up against the fence, he pulled up to the fence too, at an angle, blocking me from going any further. Now, I knew he was up to no good, and now I could get a look at him, as we were very close to each other. He had on a baseball cap, and he had a crazy ZZ Top style beard. To give you a picture, I was in the right of the two lanes, with the crazy man blocking me to the left, and to my right were 3 cement pylons, which you usually see blocking off highway construction, running the length of the lot with about a car's width, not length but width, in between them. Here's where I take a bow to the gods of dumb luck, as I saw something in those pylons that most would not. You see, prior to this road trip, I had spent 8 years as a bus driver, and much of that time was spent training new drivers. One of the maneuvers on the commercial driving test in my state was called the backwards serpentine. To pass, you had to back the bus through 3 cones positioned in a straight line. Since the cones are only a bus width apart, not length, you must turn at exactly the right time to master this move. It was very similar to what I was looking at now, although doing it with cones is a little different than a cement block, because if I crashed in a cement block, I would certainly not be able to drive out of there, and who knows what this man had in mind. I gunned it in reverse, keeping the maneuver I had taught so many times in my head. Keep in mind, driving tests are graded on accuracy, not speed, so this was the first time I had ever had to do this fast. By the time I had made it around the second pylon, he had realized what was happening, but because he had a big car and was pushed up against the fence, it took him a few wiggles to get turned around. By then, I had completed my maneuver and took the fuck off back down the road. He followed, but there was no way to know if he was chasing me or fleeing, as there was only one way in or out of this place. I was scared because I was still lost, and I didn't know if this man knew the area or if he had picked this spot to wait for lost tourists. So I wasn't out of the woods yet. Pumped full of adrenaline, I screamed out the open window, "You picked the wrong girl to play driving games with, motherfucker!" I then heard a tiny robotic voice say,
"No results for driving games, motherfucker."
I was confused for a minute, and then remembered the useless navigator on my phone, which I had discarded. It had been flung to the floor of the passenger side during the ordeal, and I wasn't about to stop and grab it, so I just began screaming, "I-80!" at the top of my lungs. Finally the phone heard me and gave me directions back to the highway. I drove around the area highways, stopping at gas stations to observe the other vehicles getting off at least a few times to make sure I wasn't being followed. Luckily, it was a pretty distinctive car, but I still did this for over an hour before I felt safe enough to camp out. So, creepy bearded man, let's not meet.